Talk about the Witch Trilogy, where I'll be giving you my thoughts and opinions on the series as a whole and the books individually. And don't worry, I'll avoid spoilers as much as I can. This review won't be in depth, but hopefully it will be enough to coax you into reading the first book or get you to continue if you'd not finish it the first time around. And towards the end, I will go through 1-star reviews on Goodreads because this series is very immersed in East and Southeast Asian cultures that I'm sure will go over the heads of those who are used to only reading Western fantasy books. So, with that said, let's get started. As a whole, the Witch series follows the story of our protagonist, Thea. Her name is spelled T-E-A. But in the middle of the book, a minor character pronounces her name as Thea. So it's easily understandable how a lot of people will misread it as T for the first half of the book, and especially if you're not going through it in a audiobook. So the story, it's told in 2 different point of views and 2 different timelines, both in the first person narration. Now, this is the one thing that confused me because both timelines are told in first person and by different people. So the eye can be quite jarring because I'm not sure because at some point in the series I get confused who I is. But it's not that big of a deal, just it can get a little confusing times. That said, this kind of narration persists throughout the entire series, so it's a non-linear storytelling. If that's not your thing, then you will have some difficulties because every single chapter switches between the past and the present. Every single chapter. Though it helps that the present is written in italics. It has a different font. The past and present is written in different fonts because the present is written from the point of view of a bard. So let's back up a bit. The story starts out with 17-year-old Thea, but it's told from the point of view of a bard. And so whenever when it says I, it's from the point of view of the bard. And you will have to read the book to find out how we got to that point. Why is this being told from the point of view of the bard? Because the past is a first-person view, but told from the point of view of our main character, Thea. So basically what happens is that 17-year-old Thea tells us her story to the bard. Then we switch on over to 13-year-old Thea. And as we learn about the younger Thea, the timeline of the older or present Thea is also moving along. So it's not just the older Thea, when she's talking, giving us a story from the point of view of the bard. They're not just sitting there and she's just talking and talking. No. So what's basically happening is that this is older Thea and this is younger Thea. So as she's telling the story of this younger Thea, her timeline is slowly moving forward. And the timeline of the 13-year-old Thea is moving faster. So at some point in the series, they will merge. into one person. Because the first book, is obviously written with the intention of making it a series. And no, it's not a spoiler, but the first book, they will not converge. The 17-year-old Thea and the 13-year-old Thea will not converge in the first book. Will that happen in the second book? I will not tell you. Will that happen in the third book? I will not tell you. You will have to read it. Now, the first book of the Bone Witch is heavy on the world building, as it should, because it's a fantasy series, and not only is it heavy with the world building, it's also very culture-based. So, the book of the book is about the world and the culture. I understand. This is where I see complaints on people saying that nothing happened, especially if you're a plot-driven reader. Things does happen. There is a plot. It's just that the book, as I've said, the book of the book is heavy on the world building. What this first book does is laying the groundwork for the whole series. And some people will not like that. And I understand. Because you want to read a book, especially the plot-driven people, they want a lot of action. And what the first book does is there's a lot of descriptive, because it's set in a big world, and each part of this world has different cultures. They're so different down to the little things, to the way they dress, to the way they talk, to the way they interact with different genders. This is where I think it differs, because this book is written by Rin Chupeco. She is a Filipino, and it's very heavily East and Southeast Asian centered culture. And what I've noticed is those who are used to reading fantasy are usually heavily influenced by Western fantasy kind of storytelling. And they're usually the ones who will not be able to appreciate the nuances that is in this book. And they're the ones who I've seen complain a lot on saying that nothing happens. What I observed in the trio's live show, they themselves, Kat, Gerald, and Trisha, they themselves had said that they're not used to reading fantasy. But they are Southeast Asian. We are Filipinos. So they were able, so since they're not used to reading fantasy, and most of the books that are out and heavily marketed are very westernized fantasy, this means that they're not influenced by those. Not really, not as much as those who read a lot of fantasy. So they were able to appreciate the little things, the nuances of the Bone Witch that the others are not able to appreciate. Yeah, like I said, I understand how some people will not be able to get that. But if you're that kind of person that you did not finish the Bone Witch because you could not wrap your head around the too much Asianness of the Bone Witch, then maybe pick this book back up in a later date. So yeah, I think I've said it a lot of times already. The first book, The Bone Witch, is heavy on world building. And the action, the real action, happens on the second book. Yes, there is action in the first book, but it's more on... See, it starts with 13-year-old Thea and how she adjusts to the things that she's learning. She's 13. I mean, you know, when you're 13, you're learning a lot about yourself. And she's also just been uprooted from her family to a new family. So those who enjoy a newfound family trope will find this fun. And then we go to the second book, The Heart Forger. That's where the action lies. Now the thing with the first book, there is a main plot, and it does have a conclusion. But the overall story does not conclude, not yet, because like I said, the timeline of 17-year-old Thea and 13-year-old Thea is still moving, and they have not converged into one story just yet. the ending of the Bone Witch, if you got to the end, that means you have enjoyed the writing style, which means you will look forward to getting to read the second book. I suggest you have the second book ready, because the end of the first book is... I'm just saying, I'm glad I had the second book, because I could not get my mind out. I mean, if I read this first book when it was released, I don't know what I would do. The agony of waiting for having the next book after that huge reveal at the end of the first book. So if you don't like that kind of hanging, well, we're lucky because we already have the second and the third book out. So that is not a problem. So yeah, there's that. And like I said, the second book, The Heart Forger, it goes into a lot of action, because this time Thea has gotten older. She's no longer that little child. They're finally traveling to other parts of the world of the Bone Witch, and that's why there's a lot more action, because Thea is finally applying what she has learned in book 1, but at the same time learning a lot of other things in book 2. What I've noticed is it's actually formulaic. What I mean is, what happens in the first book, the plot point of the flow of the first book, is what happens also in the second and the third book. Only that there's more action in the second book and not much of the world building anymore, because that's already addressed. Like I said, the first book laid out the groundwork for the world building and the culture building. So when you get to the second book, it's just action after action after action. So which makes it a lot of fun. But in between that action, there's also a lot of folklore and a lot of myths that adds a little more spice to the story. And all these folklore and history will meld in to how book 3 would go. So if you've read the first book and you wanted more action, book 2 will deliver. Book 2 will deliver that action. And the third book, it really concludes it. And it's a lot more on the characters. And the thing with the reveal in the first book is it makes you question, and it makes the readers hope that maybe what was revealed in the end of the first book will not come to pass, might be evaded, because once they converge, once the present and the past Thea, the older and the younger Thea converge, their timeline converge, it gives, I don't know, I felt like maybe if I keep reading, something different will happen. Maybe if I keep reading, what has come to pass for older Thea might still change. Will it change though is something you'll have to read. For the first book, the younger and the older Thea, they're very different. Very different. Like, I could not imagine how this younger Thea become this. How did this 13-year-old become this 17-year-old? That was what was also very interesting for me. And by the second book, the 13-year-old Thea is no longer 13 because her timeline moves faster. She's now around 15 years old. 15, 16. So they're now closer to converging in timeline. And if the first book showed how very different the younger and the older Thea is, the second book shows a bit of how still similar they are. I think that kind of writing gives the readers hope that maybe there is still a chance for this 17-year-old Thea to, I can't even say it, but you know, it gives a little bit of hope. Maybe there's still a chance for 17-year-old Thea. That's how the second book felt to me. And then the third book happens, where basically what happens in the third book is that there's only months difference. When in the first book there was years of difference, and then the second book just a year or two difference. The third book, it gets really exciting because now there's just a few months difference. So if it's not clear yet, I really enjoyed this kind of writing, and especially since it's very, very East and Southeast Asian. I made separate reviews for those in Goodreads, so you can just check it out if you want something a little more structured, because I've probably prattled on already. So let's go and try to see some 1-star reviews. Now I'm going through 1-star reviews not to insult the reviewer, but to give a little more insight on why I think some people will not enjoy reading The Bone Witch. So over at Goodreads, here's the top 1-star rating did not finish at 50%. So this person, and yes, someone from the West, did not finish The Bone Witch at 50%. So they only went through half of the book. And yeah, half of the book is mostly just world building. And that is why nothing happens. That was the big, from what I gather from this person's 1-star review, is that nothing happens. And I agree, nothing really happens in the half part, because we're mostly going through the world of the Bone Witch. We're going through the culture of the Bone Witch at that point. And something does happen, it's just really, really slow. And oof, wasteland of a story. Okay, this one. This person, the same person who said that nothing happens, they said a love triangle? A love triangle is to come in the second half. I know, because the protagonist who narrates the story in retrospection says so. No thanks. How did this become a love triangle? Okay, when I read this, the person only got to half. There is no love triangle. What are you talking about? I don't know. I mean, if you've read and finished this book, did you feel that there was a love triangle? I don't know. I don't think there was. It never occurred to me that there is a love triangle. Or wait, yeah, I think there was some sort of a hint to it, but not really. I don't know. But I can't be really a judge of that, because romance in books it's not my thing. But there isn't there isn't a love triangle. And I think, like, the person who left this review is projecting. If you are used to reading books with a lot of love triangles, maybe just a hint of a person or a character showing some kind of kindness or a different or treats the main character differently, they probably assumed it was something romantic, something like that. Maybe that's why they assume there's a love triangle. I don't know. Like I said, I can't really comment much on when it comes to romance, but yeah, there's that. Okay, and at the very bottom of this person's review, this 1-star review says, the world building could have been interesting, maybe? Up to the first half, it's kind of dull. Okay. It's kind of dull. I'm sorry, but the world building is actually what I really, really enjoyed of this book. Like I said, it's very East and Southeast Asian, a very good mix of that. And this person rated it 1 star, saying that the world building is kind of dull. And that's not the book's fault. I'm just going to say, I'm sorry, but if you think the world building is kind of dull, and if you're a Westerner reading something that's heavily East and Southeast Asian cultured, then obviously the nuances really went over your head. It's not the book's fault for this case, if you know what I mean. Okay, here's one. If I use the find feature and I look for the word necromancy, there's a lot, and I'm only looking at the 1-star reviews. There's a lot about necromancy, and I think this is something that I have to address. See, so here's a 1-star review by someone saying, where is this? Here's what they said. I've been interested in reading a fantasy book about necromancy for a while, so I've been pretty excited about reading this since I saw it on Goodreads. Sadly, I was disappointed. Well, newsflash, you would be disappointed because this book isn't about necromancy. And I found this out later. I didn't know about this until much, much later. Necromancy is something very Western. So if you go into this book expecting necromancy, you will be disappointed. Because I stumbled into Lauren's blog post. See, the thing is, Bone Witch, I get it. I get how a lot of people will really mistaken Bone Witch for necromancy. Because witch and then bones. So bones, dead bodies and all that, from a Western influence, you would really think necromancy. And I get that because I'm also influenced by that. When I saw Bone Witch, I also thought, hey, necromancy, this book is about necromancers. Maybe. And then you're given the intro right there in the book. I mean, the cover that she resurrected her brother. So I get it. I see how a lot of people will see this as about necromancy, but that's the thing you miss out. You think that from a Western influence, and then you miss out on something that's very important. Something that, if you've noticed, I've already been repeating throughout this video. This is a very East and Southeast Asian story, culture, world building. This is the part where you have to note that the author is a Filipino. So why does that matter? I stumbled into Lauren's blog post. I tried to go and look at what did other people think about the series as a whole, and then I stumbled into Lauren's actually bookmarked her blog post, so in case which I intended on reading after I finished the series. And there's a really good point, something that a lot of us, even Filipinos, would have missed. And let me repeat that again. The author is a Filipino. The story, the world building, the culture is very East and Southeast Asian. And the thing that I've read in Lauren's blog post is this. In her blog post entitled 3 Things We Don't Know About the Bone Witch World. Bone witches, or dark Asha, are based on Filipino witches called mangkukulams. So from that, the moment I read this line, was a light bulb on my head. That makes a lot more sense. And of course, it's not the first thing I think about, because I did not expect that kind of representation when I was reading this. And that makes sense. Dark Asha, the bone witches, are not necromancers, they are mangkukulams. They are witches that dabble with the dark arts. And what does it mean to be a mangkukulam in the Philippines? If you're a mangkukulam, then actually, it's taboo. They usually brew a lot of potions. So yeah, they're basically what you'd think of a witch. They do a lot of things that are very questionable. And the thing is, mangkukulam still very much are existing here in the Philippines. I live in the provinces. I live in a rural area, although it's a little more city compared to the other rural areas. But mangkukulams are very, very real. They still exist. And they dabble in dark arts, but they also heal people. And you can see how the dark asha, they heal people. People go to them for healing. They are afraid. They are afraid because it is the dark arts. It's taboo, but people still go to them for healing. I work in healthcare, and I had patients who go to this mangkukulam or would blame mangkukulam for their conditions. And I'll link the blog post that Lauren made, and you can go and read all the other details. But yeah, see, that's the thing. So there's that bone witches are not necromancers. They are mangkukulam. So let's go to one more 1-star review. I hope I can find one that actually finished the book. A lot of the 1-star, that's the thing. A lot of these 1-star reviews didn't even get past 50%. Let's see, DNF. Another one here is DNF at 50%. And then DNF at 65%. DNF at 15%. And okay, here's one that, oh yes, definitely someone obviously Western. So they gave it a 1-star review because they could, exactly what I was thinking. They gave it a 1-star review because they could not wrap themselves around what was going on. Yeah, see, their words. This story is certainly culturally diverse, but to the point that I had a hard time actually making the storyline come to life in my own head. Does that warrant a 1-star? A 1-star though. Okay, so this person actually enjoyed how the relationship between Thea and Fox. Okay. And still so, but they say here that however, there are still so many gaps that I have no desire to fill. Okay, so this person actually enjoyed the characters. So much potential, so little satisfaction. So basically what I garner from this person's 1-star review, they gave it a 1-star because they had a hard time actually making the storyline come to life in their own head. You know, that's not really the book's problem. But I guess that's you. After all that, what do you think about this story? After all that I've said, what do you think about this story, the whole series now? And will you want to read the book after this? After watching this, will you want to read the book? And if you did not finish it the first time around, will you want to read the book again, all the way to completion? I understand if you won't. I get it. Some people just don't like this kind of storytelling. But to dismiss this book, to give it a very low rating, to dismiss just because it does not fit the style of storytelling that you're used to, it's not fair. That said, tell me in the comments if you've read this book, did you enjoy it? If you've rated it low, why? Let's try and discuss. I want to know, because it's not, I know it's also not fair that I'm reading the 1-star reviews and I'm reacting to it, but the person who wrote those can't react to me. So if you've rated it low and you agree with the low ratings, the 1-star reviews of these people, then I'd like to know why you think that way. Because I really think that for the most part, people who rated this book really low is because of the cultural differences. So yeah, just tell me what you think, and see you in the next video.